Good morning. It's good to be with you on this chilly day. It's good on this Thursday. It's good to be with you. I'm always cold now. I'm wearing short sleeves. I had a jacket on earlier, but I took it off. So I'm just get used to hearing me complain about the cold weather for the next few months. It's just what I do. I've got my space here in my office already up and going. It's just going to be a long winter. I pray for me that I make it through it. So it's just hard. My wife is going to try to burn me out of the house because she's going to try to freeze me out of the house because she's always hot. So we just pray for the start. It's just gonna be a long winter. I'm just gonna wrap up every night with my shawl like a 95-year-old Russian grandmother trying to survive the cold of Siberia. So just I guess I'll survive. Anyway, enough me complaining about the weather. I promised I wouldn't do it, but I just don't like the cold weather. My feet are always cold. So anyway, I'm better than Paul was because Paul was fixed to be martyred. We're going to talk about Paul martyrdom in the coming moments. Today we're gonna finish out Romans, not Romans. We're gonna finish out Paul's in Rome. That's why I said Romans. We're gonna finish out Acts this week. So tomorrow will be our last day in Acts. We're gonna read today verses 11 through 22, and then tomorrow we'll read 23 through 30. So let's read. Say about Paul arriving in Rome and his meeting with some of the leaders. So verse 11 of chapter 28. 3 months later, we set sail on a ship that had wintered at the island, an Alexandrian ship with the twin brothers as its figurehead. We put in at Syracuse and stayed there for 3 days. Then we weighed anchor and came to Rhegium. From there, after one day, there a south wind sprang up. But on the second day, we came to Petulia. There we found believers and were invited to stay with them for 7 days. And so we came to Rome. The believers from there, when they heard of us, came as far from the Forum of Agabus and the three taverns to meet us. On seeing them, Paul thanked God and took courage. When we came into Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with the soldier who was guarding him. 3 days later, he called together the local leaders of the Jews. When they had assembled, he said to them, "Brothers, though I had done nothing against our people or the customs of our ancestors, I was arrested in Jerusalem and handed over to the Romans. When they had examined me, the Romans wanted to release me because there was no reason for the death penalty in my case. When the Jews objected, I was compelled to appeal to the emperor, even though I had no charge to bring against my nation. For this reason, therefore, I've asked to see you and speak with you, since it's for the sake of the hope of Israel that I am bound to this chain." They replied, "We have received no letters from Judea about you, and none of the brothers coming here has reported or spoken anything evil about you. We would like to hear from you from what you think with regards to this sect. We know that everywhere it is spoken against." So we see Paul speaking to the Jews that were in Rome. It's interesting. You see here, I think it's interesting to me that Paul says the religious leaders of the Jews here say that they received no word about Paul from back home. Basically, that shows that that Jesus hasn't really gotten out of that part of the world yet. There's still not a lot of knowledge of Jesus outside of Judea and really outside of the places that Paul had went. You're going to see the church spread like wildfire throughout Rome very soon, but that had not happened. And that's why Paul had to come to Rome. That's why Paul had to be here, was because when Paul came here, this is going to be the spark that was going to shoot the Christian gospel throughout all of Europe. And honestly, throughout all the world. One of the things I love about, and Tim Keller said, I just always think about, that Christianity is really the only religion to have had its geographic center shift several times. So when Christianity first started out, its geographic center, or where most of the members was in Judea, in the Holy Land. That's where most of the Christians was around Jerusalem and Galilee and places like that. Because of Paul and God working in him, the geographic center of Christianity shifts to Europe. We see Paul now coming to Rome and Paul speaking and teaching in Rome, as we're going to see tomorrow as well. And then the center of Christianity, where most of the Christians was in Europe. Later, the geographic center of Christianity shifts to America, to the United States. It was where, most of the Christians were. And now the geographic center of the Christian faith has shifted to what's called the global South. That means the parts of the world below the equator, and specifically to Africa. That is where most of the Christians is in Africa, are where the church is growing the most. And this is significant to me. We see the truth of Christianity, that Christianity is not an ethnicity or not defined by race or things such as that, but Christianity is defined by Jesus. That what it means to be a Christian throughout all ages and times is always about following Jesus. That's it. That's what Christianity is about. The gospel is this: Jesus Christ is Lord. That is the gospel. That is the good news. That's what gospel means, is good news. The good news is that Jesus Christ is Lord. And so we see Paul, having preached that message of Jesus as Lord across all of Judea, across a lot of Judea, and across a lot of Greece, Macedonia, and Roman colonies, not part of the world. Now he comes to Rome to preach the good news that Jesus Christ is Lord. Notice we're talking to the religious leaders. What he says here, he says, I am coming, for I'll speak therefore, and I've asked to see you for the reason I'm bound, since it is for the hope of Israel that I am bound with this chain. Paul, once again, because remember, Paul always knows who he's talking to, and he scopes his message based off who they are. So he's talking to Jews there in Rome. He says, I am in chains. I am here for the hope of our nation. I am in chains. I am here for the fulfillment of our purpose. I am here for the hope of the resurrection, which was promised to us in days of old, which has now been fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. So Paul is saying to the Jews in Rome, I am here as a completion of what our people have been about. So I come to speak to you for the hope of Israel. So once again, when you see him, remember always when you read these things, when it talks about, but when the Jews objected, I was compelled. The Jews there, it always means the religious leaders, because Paul is a Jew talking to other Jews, talking about Judaism. So we see Paul saying this Christianity is the natural outgrowth of who we are, and it is the fulfillment of the law and the fulfillment of the teachings and the fulfillment of the promises and the fulfillment of the covenants. We see that is what Paul is telling them. And so now Paul has arrived in Rome. He's now in Rome, and he will spend the rest of his life in Rome. He will spend the rest of his life in Rome. This was, most scholars think this was early 60s, 61, 62. So this Paul will spend the next few years of his life in Rome, setting up shop, teaching, preaching, and sharing the good news of Jesus with all who will come in here from him. So he's made it. It was a hard trip. Remember, it started all the way back. Where did this all start? It starts, was first off started when was it Ephesus, when they were rioting, and Paul says, hey, I'm a citizen. You can't just do me like this. And then eventually it gets to the religious leaders, and he says, I'm Roman. I appeal to Caesar. They're like, we have nothing to charge you with, man. Like, Festus has Agrippa come up so he can have something to write about he's being charged with. We can't send you to Rome without charges, and we're not going to send you to Rome because of a religious dispute. So now Paul has finally reached the place where the Spirit led him to. So it was hard. It was a challenging trip, but he made it to where he was supposed to be. So God saw him through. Like it says in it says, verse 15 says, on seeing them, Paul thanked God and took courage. He's completed the task that God has given him. So Paul's in Rome, and he now is teaching and preaching about who Jesus is, and the gospel is now going to take root in Rome because of Paul, and because of God. But God used Paul to do this. So tomorrow we're going to finish out Rome. We're going to finish out Acts. We're going to start with verse 23, and we'll read to the end of the chapter. And we'll talk a little bit tomorrow about what happened here, and we'll talk a little about Paul's life and kind of what happened to Paul outside of this. So thanks for joining with us, and we'll finish out the book of Acts tomorrow. Have a great day. See ya.